Ford's ST Performance division really made a strong name for themselves when they introduced the Focus and Fiesta ST about 6 years ago. Now, unfortunately, when Ford had to kill off the Focus and Fiesta name, their ST Performance divisions had to go with them. So to fill an empty void in their lineup, Ford has decided to introduce their first ever ST version of a crossover. This is the all-new 2019 Ford Edge ST. Ford says it has all of the DNA that we expect from the Focus and the Fiesta, just in a bigger, more practical package. So to see if that's truly the case, I'm just outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin here at Road America with the rest of the members of the Midwest Automotive Media Association for the Spring Rally. So the big question I want answered, is this Edge ST really an ST, or is it really just an Edge Sport with an ST badge? That's what we're here to find out. So by now you should be pretty familiar with the Ford Edge. This is the company's mid-size CUV, so it slots in between an Escape and an Explorer, and they do not offer a third row seat in this vehicle. And essentially what you're looking at used to be the Ford Edge Sport, but Ford gave it an extensive overhaul for 2019 where they introduced the ST model. It's got about 20 more horsepower under the hood versus the previous generation Edge Sport. Now you can see the design of the front fascia. I think Ford did a pretty good job with the overall look. Full LED headlights are going to be standard on the ST model. You'll have an LED low and high beam, LED turn signals, LED daytime running lights, and then you also have these really nice LED fog lights at the lower fascia. The ST model also includes its own unique black finish on the grille with the kind of mesh inserts. There's also a mesh insert at the lower portion. And overall, I think the front fascia actually is pretty handsome. I think Ford did a really good job with cleaning up the bulbous proportions of the pre-refreshed Edge. Remember, this is the second generation model that was introduced back in 2015. It is really due for a full redesign, which I'll talk about when we get into the interior of this vehicle. Now, as their mid-size crossover vehicle without a third row, this slots in between the Explorer and the Escape. As I said, its wheelbase is unchanged from the pre-refresh model at 112.2 inches long. This ST version comes with 20-inch wheels as standard. You can also option in, I believe, a 21-inch wheel. These are the standard 20-inch wheels riding on 245/50 series tires. You get slightly enlarged brakes with the ST, and then you get a sport-tuned suspension, although I do not believe they've actually lowered the vehicle all that much. It looks like it kind of has the same stance as the regular Edge models, which you can also get a 20-inch wheel on those as well. Now, at an overall length of around 188 inches long, this is roughly about the same size as the new Honda Passport, a little bit longer than a Chevrolet Blazer. So again, this is the three-row SUV. It's a little bit bigger than something like an Escape, which should give people a little bit more space without having kind of that minivan look like you get on something like the Ford Explorer. Now at the back, you can see the taillights have also been substantially overhauled. You've got full LED taillights. I think the front looks better than the rear. I'm not sure I'm liking this new cutout area here on the taillights. I do like the black with this ruby red exterior color. And then down here you can see the ST has its own unique exhaust diffuser, although these are fake exhausts. I'll let you guys hear what that engine sounds like really quick. Now, just like the Edge Sport, this has a twin turbocharged V6, and unfortunately, it doesn't really have the noises that you associate with an ST, so that's a little bit of a disappointment there when you first hear the exhaust of this thing. Now, opening up the cargo area, this is a crossover SUV, remember, so it has to be practical. And because there's no third row seat, you do get more cargo space than a lot of these smaller compact crossovers. You're looking at just under 40 cubic feet of space with the seats up. If you fold down those seats, you get around 74 cubic feet of space, which is about 10 more cubic feet of space than what you're going to get in a smaller Ford Escape. So while the outside of the Edge ST looks relatively different from the pre-refresh model. The inside, as you can see, hasn't really changed much. Ford did make a couple of slight tweaks. There's an ST badge, it's some carbon fiber trim and some accenting stitching, but the interior roughly looks the same as the 2015 model, which is definitely starting to get a little bit dated. You can see here's the massive Ford key fob that the ST gives you. There is an ST badge on the back of the key to tell you that this is an ST. The intelligent access is standard, so when you put your foot on the brake, push the button and start it up. And even from the inside of the car, you don't really hear much in terms of a noise. I'm pretty disappointed with how muted this engine sounds. I think Ford should have done more to make this engine sound a little bit nicer. Now I'm just going to briefly touch base on this interior because I barely see any changes. You have the same instrument panel display over here where there's a new boost gauge for the twin turbocharged engine. I don't really like the way this looks. It's got two productivity screens on each side, which you can kind of customize a little bit by using the little controller here on the steering wheel. You can see you can also give yourself this little teeny tiny tack with this big speedometer with this rather unattractive looking font. You have the Sync 3 head unit here with an 8-inch touchscreen display. You can see it does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and it's relatively snappy, but the screen itself just looks like it looks like the difference between an iPhone 10 and an iPhone 6. It just looks a little bit muted, it looks a little bit gray. Ford has a much newer system in the newer Lincolns, and of course the new Explorer has that new 12-inch tablet style screen. This is the older system, which is just kind of a letdown. You can see it does have its own embedded navigation system, which when you have your phone in, it's going to go back to the phone navigation. And overall, I mean, it's relatively easy to use. There's the home screen there. It does have wireless charging, which is good. But this to me just looks like 2010. It just looks kind of dated. Luckily, Ford did replace all the buttons over here, or the touch sensitive panels with full buttons. You have heated and cooled seats. This one here is missing a heated steering wheel, which kind of surprised me. You do have Ford's Copilot 360, which is nice. You have this big center console area with good storage. There's an area here where you can close off. This has the transmission selector. This has the new 8-speed, of course. When you put the vehicle into reverse, it does give you a backup camera with front and rear parking sensors, which is nice. And then if you want to put it into park, just kind of twist the dial around. You have an electronic parking brake over here. The seats also are a little bit more aggressively bolstered. There's an ST badge as well on the seat back. But in terms of what Ford used to offer on like the Focus ST and the Fiesta ST with those Recaros, these are a little bit more comfort oriented, so you'll be able to squeeze your wider frame into them. Over here on the glove compartment, you can see it hasn't really changed. It's still a pretty big size. It's damped but not lined with felt, the lid I'm talking about. And then over here on the center console, you can see it's got the same kind of storage, 2-level storage. It's actually very deep when you look into that storage. So remember, this is supposed to be a crossover. It's supposed to be more practical. And then above me over here, this particular one has a panoramic sunroof, which is nice. You couldn't get that in a Focus or a Fiesta. So overall, the inside is still very practical and easy to use, but it just doesn't feel special enough for me to warrant it as an ST badged car. So when you look at the back seat of the Edge ST, you may be able to convince your spouse that this is a much better family vehicle just by showing him or her the back seat, because look at the space back here compared to your old Focus or Fiesta ST. Ford says there's about 40 inches of legroom back here, so you can actually fit, 3 people across, because the floor is almost completely flat back here, which is nice for the middle seat passenger. You have 2-level heated rear seats back here. You have an actual power outlet, an actual 110 power outlet. You have rear seat vents. You have dual map pockets. So overall, the back seat is definitely nice. The door panels are also soft touch, just like the front seat material, which is good. You have this nice view from the panoramic sunroof, which lets in a lot of light, which is good because this all black interior is a little bit dark. And then over here, you can see it's got a nice folding armrest that folds down that gives you 2 cup holders. And then the seats, I also like how they recline to give you a little bit more comfort, although they don't actually slide forward and back. Some competitors do offer that feature. So under the hood of the Edge ST, it does say Ford Performance on there, but it's really the same 2.7 liter twin turbocharged EcoBoost V6 that they had in last year's Edge. You can also find a variation of this motor in the Ford Fusion Sport, a Ford F-150. They just offer this motor across the board. It's a good motor. It makes 335 horsepower in the ST and about 380 foot-pounds of torque. Now that horsepower is an improvement of about 20 horsepower versus the previous generation Edge Sport, so it's nice that we get more power. But the big change is an 8-speed automatic transmission that replaces the old 6-speed automatic. So sorry, ST fans, no manual transmission is available. I kind of expected that. Instead, you have an 8-speed automatic. Now you get all-wheel drive. That's going to be standard. So again, it's a twin turbocharged V6 with all-wheel drive. Ford says you should do 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds with this thing, but this is a pretty heavy vehicle. It weighs around 4,700 pounds, so it is a lot heavier than what I was expecting it to do. In terms of the towing capacity, I believe it'll tow a maximum of 3,500 pounds. I know that's the number for the regular Edge, which has a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder. Fuel economy, as this one sits is also a little bit more thirsty. It's rated at 17 in the city, 26 on the highway. Ford recommends that you put premium gas in this thing. But you guys are probably curious. This is an Edge ST. Let's get out on the road and see how it performs. So I'll be honest, I wasn't really the biggest fan of the Ford Edge Sport. I actually had one about a year ago. It was the pre-refreshed model, and I knew that there was an ST version coming. Ford says they made a lot of tweaks to this car to make it feel like an ST, but this is my first time actually behind the wheel. Now I do want to clarify one thing. This car does have a heated steering wheel. The buttons over here on the little Sync 3 display, which for some reason wasn't showing up earlier. Really nice when it's a cold day like today here in Wisconsin. But first, setting off in the Edge ST, it feels like the regular Edge, especially when you're just sitting here just driving the car through this tiny or this little side road here. The car just feels big, and that's something that the ST vehicles never really felt like before. The Focus and the Fiesta ST were just one of the most fun to drive cars for their times. And you can see Ford has done what they could with this platform. The Edge itself was never really a platform that was super sporty. It just always felt big and heavy. It's kind of traces its roots back to Ford's Mazda and Volvo days because it shares a platform with the old CX-9. But overall, the ride quality also feels a little bit on the firmer side. Remember, this has 20-inch wheels. You can also option up to like a 21-inch wheel. The car itself just feels a little bit too big at first to really be an actual ST branded car. The steering also has surprisingly good heft to it. The wheel feels like it's a much slower ratio than I would like it to be. Ford says that they've tweaked the steering to make this thing feel a little bit more sportier, but it just doesn't have that, that quick precision of the Focus and Fiesta ST. Now the big improvement that they made with this new one is that 8-speed automatic. The 6-speed auto was definitely just getting up there in the ages. It was really lacking the extra gears to make the engine feel like it was in the meat of its power band. And Ford did a good job with replacing the 8-speed or the 6-speed with this 8-speed. But I have to say, this car in general feels weird because I'm sitting so high up. I have an expectation in my mind with an ST branded car. I put it into sport mode there, and this thing's fast. It's fast, and you can hear there's some amplification of the engine noise in this car, which I don't particularly love. I'd rather hear some actual exhaust noise. This is just mostly just amplified engine noise. So I want to try to do an acceleration run from a stop here. Ford says this should get to 60 in like under 6 seconds. I have it in sport mode here. We'll try braking torquing it a little bit. And it drives just like the last Edge Sport that I drove. The engine has lots of power. This is going to smoke a Passport. It's going to smoke a Nissan Murano, definitely. It's going to smoke the Chevrolet Blazer. And it's really because this is a twin turbocharged engine. It just feels so meaty and so torquey. But in terms of, that ST feel that I usually expect with STs, I'm pretty much let down from the lack of exhaust noise to just the relaxed nature of this car. I get it. It's a crossover. It's supposed to be a crossover. It's supposed to be relaxed, comfortable. You should be able to put your family in it and it doesn't beat you up, which it definitely doesn't. The ride is on the firmer side, but I wouldn't really call this overly harsh. I'm just disappointed because of this ST badge. It's not really an ST when you start driving it. Now the visibility in here also takes a little bit of getting used to. These got these big pillars here. The view out of the back, however, is good, so I'm happy about that. But really when you start to push the Edge ST around, it feels so heavy. There's so much weight that has to be thrown around on this car, which doesn't really surprise me. This thing weighs 4,500 plus pounds. She's heavy. It's like 2,000 pounds heavier than like a Fiesta ST. And the noise, it's just a very fake artificial noise. And usually I'm okay with artificial noises, but if they don't sound all that great, which this one just doesn't sound all that great to me, I'm kind of just, I could leave the fake noise. Now you do get paddle shifters here for the 8-speed auto. They're actually pretty responsive, although it's not letting me go to third now because I'm going a little too fast. And it does rev match on your downshifts. Although when you do pull the upshift paddle, it is a little bit sluggish to respond. So again, it's a fine driving crossover. It's quiet, it's comfortable. The seats also, they're not super constricting where you can't fit into them like you had issues with in the Recaro seats of the Focus and the Fiesta. And I have to say, it is a pretty unique driving or a unique entry in this segment. There aren't any performance versions of the Blazer or the Honda Passport, so kudos to Ford for offering a unique version. It's just wearing the wrong badge. Now, fuel economy, this does get about 2 mpg worse than the EcoBoost 2-liter Edge, and I'm not gonna be able to really test the fuel economy because I'm on this short little media drive loop here. But if I do get one in the DC area to test on a longer term, I'll be able to talk about that. 1726 on premium recommended is not super amazing, but it's not super terrible. It's actually better rated than the Honda Passport on the highway, which is surprising because this is a twin turbo engine and it has 1 less gear. But overall, I like driving the Edge ST. It's a great driving SUV that, you know, Ford made pretty competitive back in the day. The interior is just kind of a big letdown. But really, if you guys are expecting to replace your Focus or your Fiesta ST with this Edge ST, I would probably tell you to wait for the upcoming Escape ST. Ford says that they should be working on something like that. This car is just too big, it's too heavy, it's too soft and comfortable to really live up to the ST name. So I had just graduated college when I first drove the Focus and the Fiesta ST, and I loved both of those cars when Ford brought the two vehicles to the market. They were just the epitome of what I expected a hot hatch to drive. So I was pretty sad when the company killed off the Fiesta and the Focus ST and replaced it with this big SUV that has an ST badge. So after spending the day driving the Edge ST, does it actually live up to the ST name? I have to say, I like the powertrain in the car. It's got a great all-wheel drive system, a really great shifting transmission. It feels quick, but it just doesn't feel hard-edged enough to be an ST. The exhaust, as you saw, is too quiet. The handling of the car doesn't feel all that special. It doesn't feel quite as nimble because the car is so big and so heavy, and the seats also just don't have that kind of aggressive feel. The interior is such a letdown. It just doesn't feel quite as special as I expected the ST model to feel. So as a, you know, fast twin turbocharged, you know, crossover that has a little bit more performance over like a Honda Passport, a Nissan Murano, or a Chevrolet Blazer, the Edge ST works, but as an ST version, it's not an ST to me. I just want to keep calling this thing a Ford Edge Sport because it just doesn't have that hard edge feel of an ST model. But if you guys are basically not caring that it doesn't feel like a full ST model, what's it going to cost to put an Edge in your driveway? Well, this car stays actually relatively inexpensive at the base end. You're going to pay around just under $30,000 for a base Ford Edge. The ST model is going to start at around $42,500 for the ST. It comes standard with that twin turbo V6, 8-speed automatic, and of course all-wheel drive capability. Now this one here has a pretty expensive upgrade package. Ford calls it the 401A upgrade package. It includes that panoramic Vista sunroof, wireless phone charging, navigation, the Ford Copilot 360, their full driver assistance stuff, a power liftgate with the hands-free option. That's about $5,500 extra. My tester, $500 for the ruby red color. For the cold weather package, another $500 bucks. With destination, you're looking at an as-tested price of $49,825, which is actually a lot of money. $50,000 is pretty big sticker shock. It makes it about $5,000 more than a Honda Passport and a Nissan Murano, but about the same price as a Chevrolet Blazer. Now, as much as I like the Chevy Blazer with its looks, I think the Chevy looks better on the outside and the inside of the Edge. You just can't deny the performance that you get with this twin turbo V6. I just hate the fact that Ford calls it an Edge ST. It's not an Edge ST, it's just an Edge Sport. It's got a really ballsy engine, but they have priced it right. I can't wait to see what Ford does with the next generation model because the interior for me is probably the biggest letdown. But I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on this 2019 Ford Edge ST. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook, and as always guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.